Hello and welcome inside the No Pulp podcast, week 3 of the college football season. Sam Corcoran alongside Tyler Aitken, Alex Remoll. Guys, how excited are you for week 3?
I'm very excited. It's been an interesting first 2 seasons. Saw a lot of upsets last week. We'll be going over those today. But I just love the mayhem of college football.
Listen, I'm excited for just a nice little week of college football. Put it on the TV, watch Georgia beat South Carolina for the 10th year in a row. But
Spencer Rattler's not ready for that Georgia defense, I'll tell you that.
Listen, I wish he was, but I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm sorry.
Exactly, but it should be an action-packed week. We have a lot of topics to break down. We're going to play a game throughout this episode called Punt or Go For It, where our producer, LG, Liam Griffin, is going to speak over the loudspeaker, give us a question, and we're going to debate that question. Does that sound good to you guys?
Sounds great. Let's go for it.
I'm looking forward to this. LG, take it away whenever you're ready.
Number 1, Marshall should be ranked.
Marshall should be ranked. Marshall coming off a big win at Notre Dame in South Bend. Alex, I'll start with you. What do you think about Marshall not being ranked?
Listen, I'm a right-footed punter, and I have a broken right leg, but I'm still going to punt on this one. I say a little bit more. One game does not a ranked team make. I just think that I haven't seen enough, and maybe Notre Dame isn't as big of a win as we thought it was going in. I'm going to have to punt on it. But a little more, a few more games that they win, even if they're not that hard, I think we could put the Thundering Herd in there.
I think, yeah, I'm totally with you. I think Marshall right now, Notre Dame, yes, that is a big win, guys, but the 25 teams ahead of them are significantly better, and I think they would beat them handily. They would beat Marshall handily, I should say. And Notre Dame is good, but they're 0-3 under Marcus Freeman. They haven't proven anything just yet, so maybe Notre Dame's just all talk, nothing real yet. And it's all just recency bias. Marshall last week, week 1, I should say, beat a Norfolk State team who went 6-5 in the FCS last year in one of the weaker conferences, where the best team in that conference was 7-5 South Carolina State. So overall, really just not, they haven't proved to me that much that they should be ranked above teams like Oregon, who beat Eastern Washington like 70-13. They would put up 70 points on that team, I should say. And I know Georgia beat them really handily, but Georgia's the number 1 team in the nation for a reason. So I think they're sitting at 26, just missing out. If you want to put that unofficial ranking there, I think that's very fair to put them there.
Look, I'm going to punt as well, but I think there is a little bit of disrespect coming from my co-host towards Marshall. Look, I think if you want to put someone into the top 25, you have to take someone out. And when you look at the top 25, I think Oregon deserves to be there. I think Pitt deserves to be there. However, I'm going to pull Texas A&M out of that top 25.
Really?
I think
Okay.
Texas A&M's offense looked horrendous against Sam Houston State in week 1. Obviously, they played horrendous in week 2. So I'd actually keep Marshall at 26, right outside the top 25. I think they're a great team. To say that they'd get demolished by any team in the top 25, I think that's incorrect. I'd put App State in the top 25 as that 25th team.
App State lost to UNC. If App State's
by
in, then
2 points with an looking offense.
If App
61
State's
points.
in, then UNC has to be in.
No, that's not how it works.
Absolutely, it's how it works.
Wait, so
NC State is UNC is 2-0.
Okay.
App State is 1-1. UNC
So should Texas
UNC
A&M be in the top 25?
Should who?
Texas A&M be in the top 25.
Yes, Texas A&M is in the SEC. They have good
lost.
talent on their team.
But they lost to an unranked team. So doesn't that mean they have to be out?
That doesn't.
They didn't lose to Norfolk State. Like, they lost to App State, who's been making noise in these
App
big
State has
games
always
for
been
years.
making name. App has always been making noise. They're an FBS team.
Shouldn't App State be in the rankings?
No, they're a 1-1 team.
I'm confused. So is Texas A&M, and App State actually beat them.
A&M. Here's the reason why A&M is in the top 25 is because they're in the SEC. They have Jimbo Fisher, who's won a national championship. They have a solid team. They were number 6 going into the year. Had a big loss. I think A&M could bounce back. We'll see what happens. But
they could. They can earn their way back into the top 25. But if we're going to be consistent here, you said that NC State or North Carolina would have to be in the top 25 if I have App State in my top 25.
Yes, absolutely.
But then let's be consistent here. If you want Texas A&M in your top 25, you have to have App State in your top 25 as well.
I mean,
you have to be consistent.
Well, listen, the whole thing is about whether Marshall should be in the top 25, if I can remind everybody.
26, I think, is fair.
Okay, but that wasn't the question, so you're still punting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still
all in
punting.
agreement.
How about this?
That's the thing, is we're all in agreement.
How about this? How about we
have to
move
know.
on to the second team that we're going to talk about?
I'd like that.
I'll let LG present it, but since we're already here, take it away, LG.
Power 5 teams should not schedule App State.
Exactly. App State obviously beat A&M. They had the huge upset over Michigan years ago. But if you're a Power 5 team, you should absolutely schedule App State for your schedule. Reason being, if you want to make the college football playoff, you need good teams to play throughout the year. And App State is now, I would say App State is one of them. They've proven time and time again that they are one of the best group of 5 teams out there. And in my opinion, we talked about A&M obviously just now, Tyler, but I think A&M is a very overrated team this year. I think they will be out of the top 25 at some point. I think you need to give them a little bit of time. But as for App State, teams should absolutely be scheduling App State on their schedule, especially if they want to make the college football playoff.
Look, I'm going to say that you should not have App State come play your Power 5 team. Look, it all comes down to risk versus reward, and that is a high-risk, low-reward situation. App State is 2-3 in their last 5 games against ranked opponents and 3-2 in their last 5 games against Power 5 schools. So it's pretty much a toss-up, 50-50. And you said you want to build your resume for the college football playoff. I don't think that beating App State moves the needle for anyone. I don't think anyone's being like, wow, you beat App State. However, if you lose to App State, oh, you lost to a group of 5 team. So if you want to challenge yourself, I think you need to play another Power 5 team. I don't think Appalachian State really helps you in any way because it doesn't help your resume. But if you lose to them, it's certainly going to hurt it.
I mean, here's my question, though. Would you rather play, if you want to strengthen your schedule, would you rather play App State or would you rather play a team in the Pac-12, let's say Cal, for example, who's been the laughingstock of the Bay Area for years now? Would you rather play App State or Cal?
I think Cal would be looked upon in a pretty similar light by those in the committee. So I just think the risk is lower with Cal.
I'm going to take off on that, and I'm going to punt, not really for a skill-based reason, but why I'd rather play a team like Cal or another Sun Belt team at a similar skill level to App State is because when you bring App State on your schedule, whether you go there or whether they come to your home stadium, you have to interact with those fans, and that atmosphere is rough. It's not what I want my non-conference game to be. If I'm in the SEC, if I'm a team like Georgia, I don't want my off weeks when I'm going to Kyle Field or Death Valley, something like that. I don't want that other week to be dealing with either those fans from Boone or going to Boone. I think there's ways to challenge your team. I'm a huge proponent of big out-of-conference games to strengthen that resume. But why would you do it with App State? There's like so many better teams, or so many teams that are a good challenge, but you don't risk embarrassing your own fans.
I mean, I wouldn't say. I think App State can prove something. It's really going to depend on the year going forward. Because you have the Sun Belt sometimes where the Sun Belt is a laughingstock, and then this year you have teams like App State, teams like Marshall, Georgia Southern. No one's really talking about them. They beat Nebraska at Nebraska. I know they just fired Scott Frost, but still, that's a Big Ten team you just beat. I think overall, if it's a strong Sun Belt conference, I think you're going to see some teams schedule App State next year. Some high-power teams, high-profile teams, I should say, schedule App State next year to boost their profile. Maybe a team like Notre Dame.
But for me, why not pull Coastal or pull Marshall? Like, I mean, these traveling fans. I mean, we saw.
I think App State just has the name, though.
They're embarrassing Kyle Field.
If you're gonna,
they're embarrassing those fans at A&M, and really, there's no one above that I'd want to play. So listen. I think that facing a challenge is a big deal. I'd go to another power conference, a weaker team in a power conference, rather than again. And then there's all that upset potential where you get to be the next team to lose to App State, and that's all anybody's going to talk about. You're just next. So to me, there's no reason to do that.
If you want to face a team with name brand value, I think you don't go App State. I think you look to the Power 5 conferences. You play a team that's all right, but nothing great. Maybe in Illinois, maybe a Louisville.
Nebraska,
Stanford, maybe.
Nebraska, yeah, where
Stanford,
they have the name brand value of a Power 5 school, but not necessarily the risk of, hey, you just lost to a Sun Belt team. It's a little embarrassing.
Fair enough. I think App State is a team that you can definitely schedule going forward. Power 5 might help depending on the team. We'll have to see what happens. But let's move on. Speaking of somewhat Power 5, it's an independent school. LG, what's this topic you want to talk about next?
BYU is the best independent team.
Tyler, I'll let you start for this one. What do you think?
I'm absolutely going for it on this. I don't even think it's a competition. I'm just going to take you. I'm taking you through each independent school. There's 7 of them. So up first is BYU, undefeated with a win over a ranked Baylor team. Liberty is 2-0. They've only beaten UAB and Southern Miss. Next up in the rankings, UConn, who has had an awful resume these past few years and only has one win over Central Connecticut State. The other 4 independent teams, UMass, Army, New Mexico State, and Notre Dame, are all 0-2. So I don't see where the competition is at all. There's not even one team that even challenges BYU.
Yeah, I'm going for it as well. Really, this question disguised is not who's better out of UMass and Army and whatever. It's BYU versus Notre Dame. And, I mean, Notre Dame, I have as many wins for Notre Dame head coach as Marcus Freeman does. So, I mean, you just can't put it out there. Kalani Sitake, he's a proven head coach. This team has won double-digit wins these last 2 years. There's no real, like, oh, do we need to wait and see? We've already seen it with multiple quarterbacks, multiple different defenses in there. I mean, they're far and away the best, and they could be
100%.
a deep sleeper playoff team. And Notre Dame, just with 2 losses already, and one of them to the Marshall Thundering Herd. Yeah, I'm going BYU.
Yeah, it's 100% BYU in my opinion. And I think going forward, right now they're 12th in the nation. If they can beat Oregon, you got Arkansas coming up. You got 2 big games. Even Notre Dame. They're going to play Notre Dame this year at BYU in Provo. That's going to be a massive game. And I think BYU has already cemented themselves as the best independent team. And I think by season's end, you could see them in a New Year's Eve Bowl or a New Year's Bowl, something like that, one of those 6 bowls right there. Even a playoff, I think that's a bit of a stretch. It's always hard for those independents to get in the playoff. But overall, I think it's by far and away BYU. And you said it. The only competition they have right now is Notre Dame. I guess you could consider Liberty. Notre Dame is not competing with BYU at this point. And Liberty is a 2-0 team that beat 2 CUSA teams, who is probably the worst Group of 5 conference in my opinion. It's that simple. But let's move on. Sticking with the independent theme, Liam, what's our next topic?
Notre Dame will not make a bowl game.
Wow, so Notre Dame, if to not make a bowl game, they would have to get less than 6 wins. However, for me, I think Notre Dame is going to bounce back, and I think they're going to get 6 wins at some point this season. Coming up for Notre Dame, you have Cal, who I already said is one of the laughingstocks of the Bay Area. Nobody really cares about Cal. You got the other Bay Area teams, Stanford, they're not that great. UNLV, even you could see them pull an upset against Syracuse. I don't even know if that would be an upset for Notre Dame. I bet they would be favored in that, guys, but if Syracuse can slow down a little bit, then Notre Dame will definitely pull off an upset. And Clemson as well. I think also, Clemson, I'm not that big of a believer in DJ Uiagalelei. So I think they could beat Clemson at home. It's in South Bend. I think that could be a win. Navy, BC. I think I just named 6 or 7 teams right there. I think they'll reach that point. Notre Dame is going to bounce back. And will they make the playoff? Will they make a New Year's Six Bowl? Probably not at this point. You're 0-2, including a brutal loss to the Marshall Thundering Herd, a Sun Belt team right there, a Group of 5, as we just talked about. But I think Notre Dame will have enough strength to make a bowl game this year.
Yeah, I'm going to punt on that as well. I don't think that Notre Dame missing a bowl game, maybe it's just old-fashioned to say that it just doesn't seem right. But I do think that there are enough wins in there. Thinking about Cal, UNLV, Navy, BC, that's 4 right there. And then to have them win 2 of UNC, Stanford, Syracuse, Clemson, USC. I think there's definitely 6 wins in there. As much as maybe people may want to hit the panic button on Notre Dame making a bowl because this tough schedule, I just don't believe it. I think Marcus Freeman is a good coach, just against what
he got a ton of praise going in. I do think he's a good head coach, and he will show that for us. And his defense has been too good.
Holding Ohio State pretty low for most of that first game. I don't think a unit like that results in a team that goes 5-7 or 4-8. I think they'll make a bowl game, but it may not be the Orange Bowl or the Sugar Bowl.
You may be looking at something like the Pinstripe Bowl for them, or the Cheez-It Bowl,
or maybe the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, something like that.
Or something like that. Yeah. Just take any company, just put it on a bowl game. That's where Notre Dame will be this year.
Yeah.
I agree with you guys. I'm punting on this. Look, with Notre Dame, they only need 6 wins, like you guys said. I think there's quite a few wins available. The defense, Alex, like you said, is really solid. The passing defense especially is great. I think the run defense needs to be cleaned up a little bit. They're allowing almost 200 rushing yards per game. But when you look at that offense, Tyler Buckner and Audric Estime have been running the ball fantastically this year, and Notre Dame is not feeding them whatsoever. So I think once Notre Dame decides to give up on the pass, focus on the run, and feed the guys that have the talent, this offense could blow up for many more points than they've been putting up so far.
No, yeah, there's nothing wrong with a little old school, and I think that's what Notre Dame needs. Notre Dame needs to be Notre Dame. They need to do it, and I think they'll win 6 games for sure.
Absolutely. What do you guys think their record's going to be at the end of this at the end of the season? I know there's been a lot of question with that. They're 0-2 now. They've been really the talking point of college football recently. Can Notre Dame bounce back? And if so, we kind of said they will bounce back. But what's their record going to be come season's end?
I have them with 7 wins. I think that we're all a little too eager to jump on Notre Dame as much as we may want to with their huge media coverage, their massive fan base, their confidence and everything. I think they're going to scrape out 7 wins, and we're going to be left with a better impression on Marcus Freeman at the end of the season than we thought we were post watching them lose to Marshall on national television.
Yeah, I've got 7-5 as well. I think that would mean Notre Dame loses 3 more games. I think BYU, USC, Clemson sounds about right to me. So we'll see what happens, but I think those 3 teams can pull off a win over Notre Dame. Other than that, Notre Dame has some easy games, and they're not an awful football team. Just because you're not a top 25 team doesn't mean you're not a solid team, and I think they'll be able to rack up a few wins.
Yeah, I'm looking at 7-5 as well. I think right now, as I mentioned, Cal, Stanford, UNLV, Syracuse, Navy, BC, that's 6 right there. They'll be able to pull off what's looking right now as another upset. Come when they play them, it may not be considered an upset, but I think they can knock it off. I mean, I think the real question also is Tyler Buchner. Is he the real deal? I mean, he's really struggled so far.
I think he just hasn't gotten enough opportunity. I think Tyler Buchner has a lot of skill. I think you can take a little bit of pressure off of him with Audric Estime as well. Mm-hmm. I think as long as they work together, Buchner will be fine. I mean, you played 2 solid defenses. I know when you look at past the Power 5, people just kind of assume that defenses are going to suck, but I mean, Notre Dame played Ohio State week 1. That is a tough draw for any offensive player.
At the Horseshoe, too.
Exactly. So I'm not worried yet. Just 2 games in.
I think, listen, Tyler Buchner now out for the season and Drew Pine taking over. I think that little change of pace at quarterback is going to unlock some things for Notre Dame. I think it's kind of putting it in the back. This is a new team with a new offensive leader. And I know Marcus Freeman has the absolute heart and soul of that locker room. So I think they'll be able to push to a bowl bid.
Absolutely. Let's hear the next topic, LG.
USC will sneak into the college football playoff.
USC right now a 2-0 team. They beat Stanford, beat Rice at home. Tyler, what do you think of that? Is USC going to make the college football playoff?
I'm going for this, absolutely. I think USC putting up 53.5 points per game. Caleb Williams is looking great. Over 500 yards, 6 touchdowns so far. And when you look at the schedule that USC has to face, like the rest of the season, Washington State, solid squad. Utah is a solid squad. I think not having to play Oregon in the regular season is absolutely huge for USC. Now, here's the thing. I think if USC goes undefeated, wins the Pac-12 championship, like they should, with the talent they have, then it should be an easy path into the college football playoff. However, a 1-loss Pac-12 championship, now that's where it starts to get a little wishy-washy. So I say if USC can go undefeated, I predict that they'll go undefeated, USC makes the college football playoff. But I feel like if they lose 1 game, that's it, because it's a pretty weak Pac-12 this year. There's a lot of other talented schools. So USC has a tall task ahead of them. I do think they're able to match that, though.
I 100% agree with you, Tyler. I think they're the best team in the Pac-12, and it's not really close right now. I think the only team that can compete to that is Utah. Oregon, we'll have to see what Bo Nix does. I'm not a big believer in him, Bo Nix. But anyways, if they can win that Utah game on October 15th, they should have a clear path to winning the Pac-12. And I think they can easily make the playoff. Clemson and Oklahoma have been a bit shaky this year. They're 5-6. If Michigan and Ohio State lose a game, they're Big Ten teams. They're playing really good opponents, and they're going to have to play each other at some point. So you could see one or maybe even both of those teams be 2-loss teams going into Selection Day in the college football playoff. I think right now, though, I agree with you, Tyler. You have to be undefeated or maybe lose 1 game, and it has to be a good game, like Utah or even Notre Dame. Arizona's honestly looked solid this year at Arizona. If they lose that game and can bounce back after that, I think they could still have a chance. But they got really lucky. Not only do they have to not play Oregon, they don't have to play Washington this year. Those are the two dogs in the Pac-12 North right there.
Mm-hmm. And just before Alex, you answer that, I do want to say I think you don't want to leave it up to the committee if you're USC. And I think a 2-loss Big Ten champion, I think, has an argument over a 1-loss Pac-12 champion, which is why I think
it depends on who they beat. It's
so important to go undefeated for USC.
Huge. Yeah, looking at this one, thinking about it before, my mind went straight to no because it's a new team out west. Haven't seen a Pac-12 team in the playoff in a while. But when I look at it more and more, this schedule is really easy. I don't think that there's really any resistance in there except for at Utah and then, of course, with the championship game. But if they win those 2 games, everything else should be a walk. And, I mean, the other teams that we're thinking about for the playoff, 2 SEC teams. I know we have that in our heads always, but it's not a given. It's still kind of hard to get 2 teams from that same division into the college football playoff, so that's not a given. Ohio State,
Has that ever happened before, actually?
2?
Two Big Ten teams in the college football playoff.
Oh, I don't know about 2 Big Ten teams.
2 SEC teams.
Oh, yeah, 2 SEC happens a lot.
Yeah,
but I still don't
Bama,
think
Georgia.
it's a given. We all have it in our heads where it's Bama and Georgia, but they're not mandatory. They're still both in the same conference.
Exactly.
Because last year we kind of forget that things had to go a little perfect to get both those teams in there.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama was on a lot of people's list to be out after that Texas A&M loss.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that USC has a clear path. Clemson, I'm not the biggest fan of. I am biased, but I mean they also have DJU at quarterback, who was nothing special to say the least last year. And then out of the Big 12, that's a mess of a conference falling apart as we watch.
Yeah.
And while Texas looks good, a loss is still a loss that they already have against Alabama. And Oklahoma, I like Brent Venables, but not maybe this year. I like Dylan Gabriel too, but I just don't know if that regime is going to be in all the way to where they get a college football playoff bid in their first year. So yeah, USC just looks more and more possible by the day, so I'm going for it.
Fair enough. Yeah, Oklahoma's been a bit shaky. Clemson's been a bit shaky. If that happens, USC.
Not so insane.
It's not so insane. I would not rule USC out right now. No. And I actually predicted them. I think I had them at 5 in my college football playoff I did an AP top 25 ranking. I had them at like 5 or 6. So they're close. They're on the verge to making something special.
Just don't lose.
Just don't lose. But let's move on. Liam, what's next for us?
UConn will cover a plus 47.5 point line at Michigan.
At the Big House, at Michigan. Massive spread, Alex. What you thinking?
Listen, I know I love seeing that 47. It's a lot of points, isn't it? But I'm still going to punt on this one because of J.J. McCarthy being the starting quarterback. Finally, his first game where he's all the way in, but he's not fully ingratiated himself to everybody. I know the fans like him and we're booing Cade McNamara, but part of that is that some of those players that have grown really attached to McNamara still have his side. So he needs to go out there. He's still trying out. Whether Harbaugh, what he says, that he's locked in or whatever, he's still trying out. So I think he's going to take it out on the UConn Huskies. And I think that the Wolverines cover at the Big House.
Yeah, I think right now I'm actually gonna disagree with you here. I think this game means way too much for Michigan, and it's not the quarterback. They've played Colorado State and Hawaii so far, who have looked god awful, and now you're playing UConn, another team that's always looked god awful. Those are your 3 out of conference games for the year. If Michigan wants to prove themselves to the playoff, they have to win big on UConn, and they're probably going to have to win big in the other Big Ten games coming up this season, because that's some of the weakest out-of-conference play I've ever seen. And you know the college football playoff, I should say, takes that very seriously, out-of-conference play. So if they don't win big, they could be screwed, and I think they could fall out of the top 4 and see their spot to whether it be USC, who we just talked about, Oklahoma, Clemson, depending on who they play. I think UConn, I don't think they're going to win this game, but I would not be surprised to see someone take Michigan's spot if UConn covers.
Look, I mean, I think we have to look at the numbers here, and it doesn't matter how much Michigan wants to win this game by 48 or more points. Since 2017, Michigan has only covered that spread against any teams twice. Since 2019, we talked about how bad UConn is. UConn has only lost by 48 or more once, and they've covered that spread against teams like Clemson, against teams like Houston, against teams like Cincinnati. So UConn certainly is an awful team, but are they awful enough to lose by 48 or more? I don't know. And I think we also have to keep in mind Nathan Carter is the third leading rusher in the entire FBS. He has almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. He can run like an absolute beast.
He's also played in 3 games.
He has played in 3 games. However, he's averaging about 130 rushing yards per game, which still ranks him in the top 20 running backs in the FBS. So you look at historical data, UConn has not lost by that much recently. Michigan hasn't beat teams by that much recently. And just like Alex said, I think the quarterback situation is going to be a little shaky for Michigan. We could see a situation where McCarthy plays the first half, then they throw McNamara back in the second half, and with all that change, maybe they throw some more backups in once they go up by 30. 47.5 is just too much.
Yeah, and while I'm not quite wavering on that, I will say that having Jim Elmore as that head coach in Connecticut, he does not want to. He's been an NFL coach. He does not want to see his team lose by 50 points. So he's going to have his guys going for it out there. My problem is I just don't think it's going to matter. I think the Wolverines they have this, some would say, cowardly out-of-conference schedule, and I think that they know that now that they have that, they need to beat up on it. And, of course, J.J. McCarthy's still out there playing for his job no matter what coach says. So it's a little crazy, but I have the Wolverines covering.
Wait, did you just change your opinion
halfway through? You just changed your mind.
I had the Wolverines covering the whole time.
No, you said first it was UConn.
No, I didn't. Somebody roll the tape. But listen, I might have misspoke, but I think that Michigan is going to cover.
So you're on my side now.
Okay.
You're on the
I've
light
been
side.
on your side.
Okay. Well, I'm not a betting expert, but I will say if you make money betting on UConn to cover the spread because of me, please do send me a thank you. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go. And to be fair, guys, I think UConn, we've seen last year they were the laughingstock of college football, but I think their team is slightly better this year. I would not be surprised if they did cover. I'm still going to go with Michigan, but at the same time, this is a better team than last year. 100%. Let's move on to our next topic, LG.
Unranked Washington should be favored at home against Michigan State.
A big game in Seattle, Washington, 11th ranked Michigan State. I guess I'll start this one off. They're 3-point favorites. Washington is 3-point favorites, which means that they're only favorites because they're at home. The spread always gives them 3 points when they're the home team. So overall, I'm really not banking on Washington to win this game. I would hit the Michigan spread. Jacoby Windmond of Michigan has looked really good on defense. He's won back-to-back Defensive Player of the Weeks for the Big Ten and had 3 forced fumbles week 2. I believe they played Akron that week, so pretty good on the defensive side. The offense is a bit shaky. Their quarterback, Payne Thorne, I'm not the biggest fan of, but I'm also not a big fan of the Washington offense. Are you telling me that Michael Penix is going to beat this Michigan State D? Michael Penix struggled so much at Indiana. I have a friend who goes to Indiana where people were booing him, people were celebrating when they lost, people protested the games, did all this stuff. He's not a good quarterback, and I will be shocked if they beat Michigan State.
Well, let me just first say that Michael Penix Jr. is averaging about 350 yards per game and 3 touchdowns per game this year. So I would certainly...
Against who, Tyler?
Okay, well, let's look at who Michigan State has played. Western Michigan and Akron. Look, my brain is telling me that Michigan State should be favorites by far for this game. I don't care who's hosting the 3-point. It's the fact that Vegas is saying this is about a toss-up game, roughly within a few points. That feels like Vegas knows something that I don't. And I
agree.
I do a lot of research. I try to prep for this stuff. And look, I think the one thing that maybe makes me feel weird about Michigan State is, like you said, Peyton Thorpe throwing less than 58% of his passes for completions, 3 interceptions this year. I don't love Thorpe. That's really the only reason to doubt Michigan State, except for Vegas. And the fact that Vegas has Washington as the favorites makes me feel like they're going to try to get people to bet on Michigan State. So they know something I don't. I feel like Washington should be favorites if Vegas says that.
A little bit of voodoo magic going on in Sid City right now.
Yeah, listen, I'm punting. I'm not listening to the voodoo magic. As tempting as it is, sometimes you see a line, you're scrolling on your phone, and you say, what do they know that I don't? But truly, I mean, there's nothing really to pull from. Washington, I mean, they've been decent in years past, but this year it's Portland State and Kent State, 2 wins. And you say Western Kentucky and Akron for Michigan State. it may all be bad, but those bad teams that Michigan State have played are still a level above who Washington has faced up against. And listen, I mean, going to that beautiful stadium is tough. Michigan State has had some struggles going out west, dating back to the 90s. But listen, Mel Tucker has shown us that he's able to lead a team even with limited quarterback play. I don't understand it. I'm not going to try to understand it. I'm just going to go with what I think, my head, not Vegas's head, even though there are some smart guys there. I'm punting. Michigan State should win this game pretty easily.
They should. I mean, you look at last year, Michigan State's coming off of an 11-2 record and a win in the Peach Bowl. And then you look at Washington, who went 4-8 last year. So it's not even like a hangover from a great season last year. There's really no reason to think that Washington should be the favorites. And yet that's still what I'm going to end up arguing.
I've seen people rank Michigan State as high as 5 in their poll. I think a lot of people think that this Michigan State team is better than what it sounds like. And you know what? I think they could prove it this week against Washington, a team where I don't have that much faith in for this week. I think it's really interesting. Again, Vegas definitely knows something that we don't. But I like Washington. Washington's defense has also been very solid this year. They're statistically, they're a bit better than Michigan State's D. Again, they've played Portland State and Kent State, who are, let's be real, those are not, when you think of college football, you're not going to think of those teams. But I think in general, it could be a defensive battle. I really am not a big fan of either of these quarterbacks, and I think this could be a low-scoring game. I think it's just going to be a dogfight in my opinion. And I think at the end of the day, Michigan State will pull away comfortably.
Well, think about this. In a close spread like that, you have the minds going up against each other. It's Mel Tucker versus Kalen DeBoer. Mel Tucker, we know he's proven. He's a great coach. Kalen DeBoer, I do like his work at Fresno State, but it's his first season at Washington. I just don't think he's ready to beat such an established Big Ten power like Michigan State. I just don't see it.
I agree with that 100%. 2 more topics. Let's stick with the Big Ten. LG, what you got for us?
Iowa will score 10-plus points against Nevada.
Iowa so far has scored 14 points total this year, 7 against South Dakota State, and 7 in the in-state rivalry to Iowa State, which they lost 10-7. And Tyler, what you thinking? Will Iowa score double digits this week?
I'm going for it. Look, Nevada allowed 55 points to Incarnate Word last week.
FCS school.
Incarnate Word, they allowed 55 points against them.
No Cam Ward on Incarnate Word. He's gone. And
I don't even know where Incarnate Word is.
So, yeah, if we're giving up 55 points to FCS schools, then I think Iowa can put up at least 10 points. Look, there's a lot of talent on this Iowa school. LaShawn Williams has averaging over 10 points per reception as a running back, has put up 115 yards, isn't really getting the carries that he should with the talent he has. So I think LaShawn Williams scampers in for a touchdown. We get at least a field goal, and that's 10. You know what? I might predict over 20 points for Iowa this week.
The spread's over 20. It's 20.5 right now.
We'll see what happens, but 10 points is just such a low bar to cross. So, yeah, I've got Iowa getting at least 10.
Yeah, listen, I'm going for it as well. I think it's just ridiculous to even think of it happening for a third game in a row where Iowa can't scrounge together 10 points somehow on a fumble recovery or a pick six or a kickoff. Not saying you have to have a great offensive game. You just got to get lucky. By the way, Incarnate Word is in beautiful San Antonio, Texas, and they put up 55 points in a win over Nevada. I believe that was in Nevada.
It was at Nevada, yeah.
It was at Nevada. Mm-hmm. So, again, it's just like, if you told me that Iowa playing against Alabama, I'd probably have Iowa scoring 10 points. It's just got to happen. It's a point of pride now. So I think they're going to do it just because, really, other than getting the win, that might be like their only mission out there.
Yeah, I think overall Iowa is the much better team than this Nevada squad. And I think right now the spread, as I said, it's 20.5 points. I think Iowa need to bounce back this week. And I think their offense is going to come out firing on all cylinders. I mean, they have to have been working on this all practice. Like, the offense is struggling. I bet they're making the players run and be like, okay, do better. Let's get a better system for you. Let's figure this out, and let's move forward and beat Nevada this week. And again, we're starting to near the end of the out-of-conference play for all the teams. Nevada for Iowa, that's it for them. This is their last out-of-conference team before they got Rutgers, Michigan, and then the rest of the Big Ten teams that they got to face this year. So if Iowa want to beat any of these Big Ten teams, they're going to have to step it up against Nevada because the road only gets tougher from here.
Yeah, this is their last chance to gear it up. So I think, again, if they don't put up 10 points against Nevada, going up against some of these schools like Michigan State, I don't know exactly who they're playing, but I know they're playing a lot of tough defenses, and they're just going to be even more daunting of a task if you can't put up 10 points against a team that got obliterated by Incarnate Word. So there you go.
How many points do you guys think Iowa will put up against Nevada this week?
I think the floodgates are open. 17 points. A massive performance out there like the early 80s Chargers, just airing it out, 17 whole points.
I'm going to go above that. I'm going to say 31 points.
You read my mind. I was about to say 31.
I was going to go 27. I felt the signals coming from you.
We just got some voodoo magic. That's the
Voodoo
theme
magic.
of this, man. Voodoo magic throughout. But Iowa need to step it up. Nevada, again, if you're allowing 55 points to an FCS team, a Big Ten team could score more. Now, it's Iowa. They've struggled on offense this year. They're going to bounce back big this week. I'm taking the spread on this. And I think Iowa's going to have a good week going into week 4. They got Rutgers. I think they'll be able to bounce back this week for their last week of out-of-conference play. Final topic here. We got a big game between Oklahoma and Nebraska. LG, what's your big question about this?
Will Nebraska play inspired against Oklahoma in its first game without Scott Frost?
Now, if you have been living under a rock, Scott Frost was fired earlier this week after Nebraska lost to another Sun Belt team, Georgia Southern, as previously mentioned. Alex, what do you think? Is Nebraska going to bounce back against Oklahoma? Are they going to play with a chip on their shoulder and win?
Listen, it pains me to say this as an Orlando, Florida native. I have a lot of respect for national champion Scott Frost. National champion, guys. But he was, at this point, just a massive distraction, a scourge to this team. I think they're going to be coming out swinging. Will it be enough to beat Oklahoma? No, I don't think so. I think Brent Venables is a great coach and a defensive leader, and they will, but we will see a lot more from Nebraska than we have these last 2 weeks because it's all been about them. And that's not where Nebraska shines. Nebraska shines just doing their work, running the ball, beating Big Ten teams by 3 points. Like, that's their game, and I think they'll be able to get back to it after this Oklahoma game as long as they don't embarrass themselves, which I don't think they will because the distraction is away.
I absolutely agree with you. I think when a coach is fired and you have a chance to maybe prove yourself to a new coach, earn some more playing time, or maybe prove that you weren't the problem the coach was, you're obviously going to want to play a little bit harder. You have a little bit of extra motivation, and the stats back it up. So I'm not going to look at the NCAA. There's no stats on this, but in the NFL, since 2003, 30 coaches have been fired mid-season. Now, in every game of that season before a coach was fired, NFL teams won on average 27% of the time. In the one game after a coach was fired, they win 47% of the time. So you are 20% more likely to win after your coach is fired. The stats don't lie. The numbers don't lie. And I feel like Nebraska's probably not going to win. They might still be on that losing end, but they're certainly going to play harder, and they're certainly going to play better without Frost in charge.
Yeah, Mickey Joseph seems like he's got the locker room. A lot of people like this guy instead of Scott Frost. I think I'm going to punt on this one, though. I think Oklahoma will win this game handily, in my opinion, because, I mean, Nebraska just does not have the talent that Oklahoma has, and it's really that simple. I think Brent Venables can outcoach Nebraska. I think the Oklahoma players will outplay Nebraska. At the end of the day, Oklahoma's going to win this game. And Scott Frost was not a good coach, but Oklahoma needs to prove something even more this week. They've struggled to start the year. I mean, who did they play last week? It was, if I look it up real quick, they've had 2 games where they've really struggled so far. And overall, I think they just need to prove something this week. It's that simple.
Yeah, Oklahoma hasn't been bad against Kent State and UTEP.
Kent State and UTEP.
Nobody was really paying any attention to both of those games, both at home. Now Oklahoma has to go to Nebraska up against a kind of scrappy team with their interim head coach. And I think this is where Brent Venables wants Dylan Gabriel, another UCF product, to show out and show where those kind of dark horse Heisman buzz, where all that's coming from, because nobody's seen it yet, because I'll tell you, ain't nobody who's not from any of those schools before watch that game. Watch those first 2 games of Oklahoma. Sorry. So I think that this is their opportunity to show out. But I still think that Nebraska has that kind of edge that you get right off firing a head coach.
I think it's at Nebraska, too. I think that crowd is going to be very into it. The 3rd largest city in Nebraska when they're playing at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. I think the crowd's going to be into it. The players are going to be into it. They're going to be ready to go to battle, and I'm looking forward to it. Shout out to the old No Pulp intro.
Shout out.
I will say Nebraska has sold out every single home game since 1962, so that crowd will certainly be roaring.
Tyler, how old were you then?
In 1962,
I was negative 51.
Yeah, I think negative 41 maybe.
Yeah,
negative
41. My bad. 41.
Negative 41.
Wow.
So not quite on this earth.
I couldn't do math back then, so still can't do math today.
No,
but
still probably.
That's why we're here.
I was still probably a better coach at negative 41 than Scott Frost.
Come on, he's a national champion. Come on.
You guys think this is still a rivalry though? Oklahoma, Nebraska. They were both Big 12 schools at one point. Battled it out for years. Do you guys think it's still a rivalry today?
Absolutely. I think with any rivalry, you're going to have ebbs and flows. You're going to have streaks. But it comes down to the history. It comes down to the fans, the traditions. And this rivalry still has all of that. The history is still there. These schools still don't like each other. The fans still love rooting against each other teams. Just because Oklahoma's been dominating recently does not mean that this isn't a rivalry. Nebraska won 16 of the first 22 games in this series. In the 90s, they won 8 of the 9 matchups in this series. So Nebraska has certainly shined, and I don't think I ever heard an argument that when they were dominating that it wasn't a rivalry. So I don't know. I just still feel like the bad blood is there just because Oklahoma has been better recently doesn't mean that it's not a rivalry anymore. Also, Nebraska has won 7 of the last 8 matchups that were played in Lincoln, Nebraska. So when it comes to home games for Nebraska, they're still very much in charge.
Yeah, listen, I think this is absolutely still a rivalry. And I'll say on a larger scale, I don't get this whole thing where everybody needs to say, is this game a rivalry? Is this game a rivalry? I say, as long as there's some tradition tied to it, why not keep it a rivalry to kind of instill more meaning into a regular season college football game, especially something out of conference like this. Listen, this game's been played 88 times since 1912. So if you think about when the Big Ten left, or when Nebraska left to the Big Ten, it's basically every year that they've been in the same conference. So, again, this has been a rivalry of streaks, but it's absolutely still a rivalry, and we can't kind of forget all this history just because Oklahoma's been good and Nebraska hasn't. Because if Nebraska comes back and is somehow better than Oklahoma, is it also still not a rivalry? I don't know. It's not something I like to do. I like to say, why can't we all have these big rivalry games? Because rivalry games are fun.
They are.
Why can't we have more of them?
It's
Everybody's trying to shoot all these little ones down. Why not?
Exactly. And these two teams were going at it for years. You had those stretches in the 90s where Nebraska dominated Oklahoma. In the 2000s, it was the exact opposite. Before 2021, their last meeting was 2010, and Oklahoma only squeaked by Nebraska, third-ranked Oklahoma, 23-16 against an unranked Nebraska team. My opinion, this is basically like the Syracuse-Georgetown of college football. It's a big rivalry, but it's kind of forgotten. The conference realignments, all that, whether it be with the ACC Big East back in 2013-ish, or now the Big Ten, Big 12, a lot of teams switched over at some point. It's exactly like that. It's a forgotten rivalry, but there's still bad blood between these two teams, and you cannot forget about that. And this is going to be a fun game, in my opinion. I think both teams want it so bad, and I'm excited. It's the big noon game for a reason. I think a lot of people are like, why is Nebraska on here? It's because it's Oklahoma, Nebraska. They put it on Big Noon before Scott Frost got fired, but that just strengthens the headlines even more, and I'm excited to watch this game tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's a game that's happened 88 times with a team with an interim head coach, team with a new head coach who's been rumored to be in these head coaching searches for years. Who doesn't want to watch this game? Listen, unless you got something else going on, it's what I'd be doing. So, this is absolutely a rivalry, and I think that Nebraska will give a better game than you may think just looking at the squads.
Yeah, like you said, Sam, the bad blood is certainly there. I do take a little bit of issue with your comparison to Syracuse-Georgetown.
What's wrong with that?
Well, given the fact that neither Syracuse or Georgetown has been ranked in the last few years, with Oklahoma dominating recently.
It's still bad blood. It's still bad blood against two teams.
Yeah, the bad blood is still there, but we do not have a powerhouse and a non-powerhouse between Syracuse and Georgetown anymore.
What's a better comparison then?
A better comparison.
South Carolina Clemson, I hate to say it.
South Carolina Clemson, there we go.
Listen, little history lesson for everybody. When I was a wee lad in the early 2010s, South Carolina won that game 5 times in a row. And now I have to listen to people say in the past couple years, oh, South Carolina Clemson, is it even a rivalry? Yes, it is, because there's so much history, so much bad blood there if you've ever been there. And if you've ever been to either of these places, they'll tell you that they don't like each other. So I say keep it going. Even though one team's in a little better standing right now, to understate, it's still a rivalry. It still matters, and Nebraska would love nothing more than to get one over their old rivals at home with this new regime in place. I think it's a huge deal, and I don't think we should mess with it. That's all I'm saying.
It's going to be a fun week of college football. This game kicks it off. You got other games, BYU, Oregon. Going to be an absolutely amazing week for college football. Week 3 coming up soon. But that's going to do it for the No Pulp podcast. For Tyler, Alex, and I, from our producer, Liam Griffin, thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.